Hey guys, welcome to Stitchinit. Today's video is a special request from Colleen, who was interested to see how I stitch in hand. Now I've been cross stitching for almost 8 years now, and most of the time I have used hoops or Q-snaps. You know, using a frame or a hoop does seem to help the stitches lie the most uniformly, and especially with two strands, you know, and get the tension. You know, you have the opportunity, because it stretches out the holes and it holds the fabric in place, you have the opportunity to really get that really nice straight tension on your projects. But stitching in hand is a lot faster, and once you practice and get used to it, you know, your stitches can look just as nice. So I brought a couple projects to show you today that I've been working on and stitching in hand, and I'm going to demonstrate making a few X's on each of those and talking a little bit about you know, some tips and some tricks that I've learned over the past couple years as I've transitioned away from Q-snaps and, you know, using the sewing method. So the first project I want to show you is on 14 count Aida, and this is a dimensions kit called Max the Cat, and it's got 3 different scenes, and I'm working on the first one, and I'm about halfway, almost halfway done, but I haven't done any of the back stitching yet. And I'm going to be, I picked out my color already. It's just going to be 2 strands of one color. So first, I wanted to show you first when you're holding the fabric, and this is a little bit different when, you know, from other people, and also, you know, when you're using linen or something, it's much more flimsy and easier to hold on to sometimes, or to scrunch up in your hand. But the Aida is a little bit stiffer and can be difficult to hold. But I'm going to show you first how I hold my hand, okay, when I'm holding the fabric. Now, the point of stitching in hand, when you've got you've got these 2 fingers most people keep on top, and this is how you're stretching out your fabric and holding the fabric really taut with these 2 fingers. Now what's going on the back is I'm holding with my last 3 fingers, just kind of supporting the fabric and feeling around on the back, so that I can feel any kind of knots that come up, or in, you know, just hard discrepancies. Now I'm over here in the middle, so typically I roll up as I get a little bit further along to hold it sideways in my hand like that, or I will scrunch it up when it's just linen, basically. But I roll it up like this so I can position my fingers over and hold it. Yeah, that's the way I would normally do it. See, my fingers, my 3 fingers are on the back like that, feeling that stitched area so I can get everything, you know, no lumps, no knots, anything like that. So I've already taken 1 long strand of this color that I'm going to be using, and I've folded it in half. Let me see if I can get it to focus. There we go. I folded it in half and threaded my needle with the ends, okay? And that left this, as you can see, I don't know if this is, it leaves a loop on the other end. And that is what I'm going to be starting on the back. I'm going to be using the loop start. Now, in my case, I do have to mention that I have always crossed my X's for some reason from the top right to the bottom left. Excuse me, I just said that backwards. The top left to the bottom right, and then the top right to the bottom left. So I always start in the top left corner, bottom right, come up and stitch on the top right, and then to the bottom corner. So some people stitch from the bottom left corner first. Now, so that's going to be a little bit different for me, but the technique is still the same, and I've been watching a lot of other videos on sewing in hand. I watched Kitten Stitcher, I watched Caterpillar Cross Stitch, I watched Sapphire Mountain Handcrafts, I think is what it's called. I watched Priscilla and Chelsea. Who else did I watch? Those are the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. And they also had really good ideas and tips for as well. So let me just grab my pattern so I can see where I'm supposed to be stitching. Alright, I'm back with my project. I'm ready to go. I made sure all my... Okay, so I cross each X individually. Okay, each of these X's are crossed individually. No matter if I use an overdyed or just DMC or something like that, it's most comfortable for me to remember to cross my X's individually, so that if I make a mistake, I can just pull one X out at a time. I don't have to pull out an entire row. Okay, so it just helps me keep organized. Now I'm going to do 2 stitches right here, and I'm going to show you how I do that. Now I'm stitching to the right. When I stitch to the right, for some reason it's easier to stitch to the left. Okay, when I'm doing it like this, stitch from right to left, it's easier. Okay, so now this is what I like to do. Sometimes I hold, especially when working with multiple strands, to keep the tension as clean as possible. I hold it with my fingers right here, or at least might loop it around my thumb so I can keep it. Now, I've already explained I go from top left to bottom right, and then sew up and then cross from top. So here, let me show you how I do it. Some people are scooping to the side, some people are scooping from the top, and in my case I scoop and sew from the bottom. So here I go. I go in the bottom hole while I'm holding it, and then scoop up to the top hole, okay, and then pull through, and there's one cross, okay. And then I do have to come around when I'm stitching from left to right. I do have to come behind to make sure to get it in the next hole. And in this case I scoop and guide it with my thumb again to help it lay correctly, and that's 2. Okay, so the next row, let me show you. This is now going from right to left. It's the same thing, but I don't have to reach around the fabric. Let me try to get up close. I'm on the upper right, the upper left. The upper left, I'm going to be crossing this X right here. Okay? So I scoop. That's what I call it, scooping, and then lay the thread. See, I got one that's... Now see, this is a common occurrence. One leg has crossed cleanly, and then the other leg just hasn't. And not only that, as I pull it, and sometimes it doesn't, you have to adjust the tension manually to get those threads to go back together. Okay? Now, I'm about to cross my X, and then jump up from behind to the next X right there. I'm crossing this X in one motion, and then coming up on the next X all in one motion. Okay, let me try to do that again so I can show you. I'm holding it again with my thumb and my finger to keep it out of the way and keep it pretty taut. I scoop, and this is, you know, I also, when I rest my needle in the thing, and that's good, and adjust it to be more straight with my thumbnail if I need to. Scoop to the next, pull through, scoop, and scoop, And that was the last one on that row. So I would finish it to the back. Okay, so right now I'm stitching this gray color. I've stitched 6 stitches so far. Let me look at my pattern real quick. Okay. So I'm just going from the most convenient, the shortest travel distance, basically. You know, I came down in this hole and I'm coming up in the next row down here. I'm holding it with my thumb and forefinger. I'm entering and scoop. To me, it's much easier to do that vertical scoop than try to orient your stitch so you're scooping horizontally. Okay, I come around back when I'm stitching left to right, but I still do the scoop. Scoop. Okay. Okay, this time, since last time on this row I stitched the stitches from left to right. Oh, let me see. This row I stitched left to right. This row I stitched right to left. So I'll be stitching right to left. I said it backwards. Oh my gosh, I'm getting mixed up here. So I'm stitching right to left, so I'll be able to scoop on and go to the next stitch without having to reach around to the back again. So holding the tension in my thumb and forefinger, and then going down and scooping to the next square to the top. Scoop. That's good. And then this was just 2 stitches right there. Keep going with those 2 stitches. So now I'm stitching from left to right again, just 2 stitches. Scoop. Trying to keep it in frame for you guys. It's a little bit difficult, especially trying to get it up as close up as possible. Okay, so pinch those threads to keep them, ouch. There. So far I've stitched all this, not this light gray. This medium gray is what I'm stitching here in hand. And you can see what it looks like. The tension is looking pretty good on 14 count Aida. And Aida is a really good one to practice on because it is more structured and, you know, it's a little stiffer than linen. Linen can be a little bit harder to control, which I'll show in a second. Okay, so I'm going to put that one aside for a second. Let me get out my next pattern so I can see. Okay. I didn't leave this in a good position. This next one is a pattern called by White Raven Patterns, and it's just a bathroom rules. As you can see, I'm about to stitch the words always use soap. Now, this is on 32 count linen. It's just Weigart linen that I coffee dyed, and I'm using black DMC, so this is pretty easy. Now, for linen, when I stitch, I don't tend to roll the fabric as much, although I probably should, but I just kind of grab it and bunch it up in my hand like that. Gets a bunch of wrinkles in there, but it's easiest, and a lot of times you're letting go of it. You're not holding it and, you know, for hours at a time. But I just bunch up my hand. See, this is just a fat eighth, number one. It's not too big a piece of fabric. Typically when I stitch in hand, I try to keep my fabric, it's easiest to work on, you know, a 1/4 yard or smaller. If you're working on a huge a huge piece of fabric for a long dog sampler or something, you know, it can be a little unwieldy. So, okay. Now it's hard to keep tension on 32 count linen, especially because they come out, the X's come out a little bit fuller. You got the 2 strands, which those threads are moving independently practically. So let me just end this one because I actually do have to, I'm going to show you how I end the thread, and then I'm going to start it again on linen. Not using a loop start this time. I'm going to try to use, let me see, 1, 2, okay. So this is the last stitch of this word, and so I'm going to turn around my thread at this point to end it off and just kind of bury it. It's called a bargello tuck, or you know, you bury it in the thread. Let me show you what I'm doing here. Yes, so just pull it through, bury it. I like to do it twice because it's still pretty easy. Of course, I don't have a pair of scissors in front of me, so I gotta grab a pair if you don't mind. Okay. So then I would trim my thread. I passed it through twice, so I feel pretty confident about clipping it off pretty close, as you can see. Now I've got, this is not a very long length of thread to work with, but I'm going to start it off anyway because it's going to be difficult to start with just this amount of thread, but we're going to do it anyway. I'm going to show you how to do a pin stitch from the front. Now normally I do a modified pin stitch on linen and sometimes on Aida too, but what it really involves, the pin stitch is coming up, the essence of the pin stitch anyway, is coming up in the middle of the X and then going to the corners so that you secure the thread in one X and you don't have to bury it. And this really works good for when you have it, like here I'm about to go over 2 spaces. Now remember in linen you count 2 threads per square. Oops. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, so that is where I would normally start my X, in the top left corner. Okay, but instead I would come down to the middle, skip over the threads. This is what I do. And then this is what I typically do, but I'm going to show you another start too if I get a chance. See, I'm going to the bottom left corner. It doesn't really matter which corner you go to because you're going to come up in another corner. Flip it over. There we go. Focus. Leave your little tail about 1/4 of an inch. Then you come back. You see you've got a little fractional stitch practically. Then you come back and I'm going to start my X right away. I've come up in another corner, if I can do it. See, I'm coming up in the corner that I normally start my X's in. Don't pull all the way, you know, making sure if you pull too hard, you will pull that thread out. And then you see I'm already naturally holding it with my thumb and my forefinger to keep the tension correct. And then I start my X. Okay. And sometimes the first X, especially when you're using the pin stitch, can look a little lumpy. But that's okay. It's secure. See that? Is that? Looks like I skipped a thread there. See? Now that's one thing. See, I came up too high. I skipped a thread, so I'm going to have to come back out again. I don't have to take my thread out because I skipped the thread. I don't have to take it out all the way. I can just See how I'm not skipping. I'm just fixing my mistake. If I can get it to focus and show you. I'm fixing my mistake by just going to the previous thread, sewing it, so I didn't have to take off my needle or anything to do it. Okay. Alright, so I'm going from left to right, which means I have to stitch each X by crossing around to the back. So when I stitch from right to left is when I can go the whole row individually X's without having to reach around like I'm doing. I got 3 X's coming. It's pretty tricky to switch from 14 count Aida to go to the 32 count linen, and then I'm going to switch real quick to another project too to show you with 1 strand, because it's easier to do it with 1 strand than it is to try to control the tension with 2 strands. Okay. So this is more of a sampler style. I'm always readjusting my fingers to get because you want to get the best tension as possible there. You want to hold it as tight and far. Sometimes I even take my linen and tug on it before I start stitching on it to open up those holes. I don't know if I should be doing that or not, but it does help. Okay, so I'm starting again. Focus. Starting again from the top left, I come down to the bottom right and scoop up. Okay, and that's the first. And I'm coming up. See, you can play with yourself and try to see. I can go to the next X, partly because it's going to the left and up, by scooping again, scooping through, and so I don't have to stop and take my hand off and move it to the back. Scoop, pull it through. Alright, now in this case I'm moving from right to left, so I'm not going to have to reach around the back again. Okay, scoop, ooh, scoop. Now I've noticed, especially when I first started doing this, I had more mistakes at first. That's one letter, the letter S, for always use soap. Okay, so that's what I just did. I've noticed what I was saying is, what was I saying? My mind went blank. I'll have to look back to figure out what I was trying to tell you. I can't remember at all what I was just about to say. Okay, so that is 32 count linen, and it's a good thing to start on if you feel like you're doing pretty good on the Aida and you want to start stitching on linen. Yeah, 32 count. This was all done in hand, and let me show you the back, because I cross each X individually just to organize myself and keep that the same no matter what. If I'm using overdyes or silk, I think it's easier to cross each individual X, because if I cross these 2 X's but then I realize I made a mistake there, sorry, I was getting out of the frame again. If I made a mistake there, I only have to pull out 2 X's, and I know exactly how they're coming out because I cross them the same way every single time. So that's a time saver too. Now to go on, it is actually easier to sew in hand with one strand than it is with two, because you don't have those tension problems like you do with the other one. So let me get my pattern real quick. Where did I put it? Oh. Okay, so this is going to be the most fun, I think. Stitching in hand with one strand on 36 count is not that much smaller. 36 count really is not that much smaller than 32 count. So, okay, sorry about that. My video cut off for a second there, but I'm back. Okay, so I'm just going to show you guys real quick on 36 count what it's like to stitch with one strand. Now, right now I'm going to be going from, I've already stopped mid X there. I always leave my needle where I'm stitching so I can immediately go back to it. Okay, and I'm going to be stitching from right to left, and then left to right, and then right to left to fill out a little block. So, like I said, it's a little bit easier with one strand because you don't have to pinch it and control it at all. So it goes faster, and you probably won't make as many mistakes depending if you're used to stitching on 36 count. Now see, I don't know if I can get any closer, but I'm skipping over 2 threads and scooping. I do it naturally. I'm still holding it out of the way with my thumb and forefinger. I'll do it a little bit naturally, I guess. I'm holding the camera in between me and the stitching, so okay. Now first I'm going to show you, sometimes you do have to make a little bit of, I've been talking about this whole time how I cross my X's from left top to right bottom, and then right top to left bottom. And when I go underneath, I just finished this X. Well, I can't start it in the next one because it would be the same hole. So I got to come up in the bottom right and then cross up. And this is another case. You know, you just have to look around and plan how your stitches are going to travel. It's sort of a game that stitchers can play, is like, how is my thread going to travel along the back? You know, it looks the same from the front, but where are you going to enter and exit your thread so you can save thread and have a nice looking back. Okay. It's a little bit harder to see. Harder to see the 36 count from far away. I mean, I'm holding it really close for you guys, but I'm saying I can barely see what I'm doing. So, I'm using a 28 needle for this 36 count. I don't think I said that. I used a 20, I don't know if it was a 26 or 24 on the 32 count, and it was some sort of 24 on the 14 count as well. See, so I did those 2 small rows, and now I'm going to start right underneath it. So I got to compensate and then start in a clean hole. You know, that's another tip that they tell you, that you don't want to come up in a dirty hole, is what it's called. You want to come up in a clean hole and go down in a dirty hole. A dirty hole meaning that there's already thread. There's already thread. They taught me that in the EGA. There's already thread there. So if you're coming up in a dirty hole, then you're potentially bringing threads forward. Whereas if you go down in a dirty hole, you're pushing the threads to the back, if that makes any sense. 2. See, I'm always trying to figure out how, because right here, I told you I'm stitching from right to left, and I don't have to go to the back at all, cross to the back at all. I can just keep stitching, and so I'm always trying to figure out how to stitch within a section from right to left. Set it up so I can stitch from right to left. Even though I typically only start, now I see this can happen sometimes when you're stitching in hand. See that little teeny tiny little piece of blue thread that came through? If it'll focus, let's see. A little tiny piece of blue thread. See what's going on the back, because so it was just a little tail that got caught. Okay, so it's out now. Just got to watch for things like that when you're scooping in the back. But that's also what you use your back fingers for, is you feel what's going on in the back, so you can do that. Okay. I'm about to skip a thread, so okay. So I'm just stitching a little bit of this red in here. That's 36 count, and really I gotta check back here to see what it's doing. What the heck? A little loop back there, but it happens. Okay. So that's the way I do it. And you can work up some pretty good speed once you get used to it. So if you have any questions, I tried to get the clearest video of it that I could, and I wanted to show you guys a little bit on different fabrics. You do have to be careful with your tension on the linen, because it's the softer, flimsier fabric, and you can really pull those threads out, distort them if you aren't careful. So again, whenever I stitch, either I finish off a thread and then tuck my needle in the corner or something, or I stitch it and, hold on, let me find my next, oh gosh. I store it mid, see, this is where my next stitch is, so I just kind of scoop and store it right there. That's the way I would leave it. I've quit using needle minders as much, that's the good thing about stitching in hand too. Other people have mentioned that it's really easy to take a project and go when you don't have a Q-snap. This project, which is I think on a fat 1/8 of fabric, is good to go. I just fold it up and it's in a little, a little zip bag, so it's not, you don't have to have big project bags, you don't have to have grime guards, you don't have to have a lot of different accessories. I do like the thread keeps and the floss rings, whatever you call them, and they're pretty fun. But other than that, if you guys have any questions about stitching in hand, or if you think I need to refilm something to make it clearer, just let me know. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.